Hey guys, welcome to Overshot, a paintball podcast. We got a full house this time, but before we get started with our awesome guest, we have two beautiful sponsors for this episode. First and always is Zana Sports, makers of the SF joggers and the Grind Air gloves. We still have not given away the gloves yet. We're going to, I promise, one day. But so be tuned for that. But the Version 2 joggers just came out, so definitely pre-order them. And when you go to checkout, use code Overshot. You'll get 10% off your entire order, whatever it is, whether it's joggers, shirts, this, that, and your other thing. And yeah, man, support them. They've been really supportive of our podcast since day one. And we also have another sponsor for this episode. Waldo, you want to get into that one?
Yeah, man. So we're going to have Cousins Paintball, shopcousinspaintball.com. Cousins Paintball with, a bunch of unique playing fields in the tri-state area. You got New Jersey, you got Staten Island, you got upstate New York, and actually where we mostly play out of, Long Island, New York. So definitely visit them. Tell them the Overshot crew the Overshot crew sent you, and they'll take care of you guys. So without further ado, we got very special guest, kind of one of the most low-key pros out there right now. From New York Xtreme, we got Robby Altamore. He's got a rich and storied past, a bunch of teams, MOD, East Coast Empire, the Brooklyn Bears. So Robby, welcome to the studio, man. And just what was your first time playing like?
Probably the best thing in my life. Probably when I picked up a gun. I started at 10 when you were allowed to play.
Right.
My brother's older than me by 2 years. So once I was 10, they were like, all right, we're going to play. They gave me a Talon. They sent me in the backyard. And my buddy was like, all right, listen, I'm not going to shoot you. You could shoot me. Mm-hmm. And we're going to play in the dark. So we were in the woods in the dark. I had a Talon. And my heart was racing, and I thought, like, he was like the Predator, And next thing you know, like, I shot him, and there was probably nothing better of a feeling than shooting somebody without getting in trouble.
Right.
And after that, they took me to Cousins. And, if you live on Long Island, that was the place to play. It was woods ball. Then once we started going to Cousins, they had the hyperball field. And that's where we met, the legends, the
right.
Timberwolves and the Julios and guys that really crafted the game and turned speedball into what it is. So Cousins was like the breaking point of where we started like to propel into getting out of the woods.
Right.
And then, speedball started to take off. So once speedball started to take off and we started doing some locals, X-Ball was like the first, big thing for venues.
Right.
And that's kind of like where I started, right from the woods and then into hyperball, and then the league started. So it was a great transition, but learning from those guys, it was an experience that I can't put a price on because those guys knew so much about the game.
Oh, yeah.
Things you didn't even think of. And it's not like it was today. Back then it was hard to dig out information from, those guys.
Right.
Because it was like a blood sport.
Yeah, it was a man's game back then.
It was a man's game back then. There was no like, you shot me 7 times, that's overshooting. It was like, no, I shot you 30 times and you're still
you need to get out.
You need to get out. You're going to come out here, you're going to get blown up.
Uh-huh.
And until you beat us, that's how it's going to be.
Yeah, no, that's how it was. Like, I love the story with Greenspan, who was talking about, because back in the day, all the pros used to ref the other events, and he went to go pull somebody out, and he was like, if you pull me out right now, I'm going to beat the shit out of you in the parking lot. He's like, player clean. You're right, dude.
You're clean. Stay in, dude. It's rub.
Yeah, right. All rub.
All rub.
But that's awesome. So what was like the first team you kind of joined?
So once we started getting into more of the speedball, we had a team called Evil Empire. Mm-hmm. And Evil Empire, we started winning all the locals, which was like the GPLs and the NEPLs and the Captain Carls. And there was a team called Breakthrough that was also from Long Island. And that's where like Nick Crichione came from.
Okay.
Who's a team from the Bears,
mm-hmm.
ECE. He's just as good as all the pros. He's,
right.
So what we did was, it was always us and them.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, Nick, but we beat them every time. And once we figured out that they were just as good as us, we decided to merge teams.
There you go.
And once we merged, we became ECE. And I was 14 years old. I was working at High Velocity Paintball. They gave me a job. I helped build that place, the outdoor.
Okay.
And when we were out there, that's where me and Nick were like kind of figuring out like what should we name the team, you know? And we decided to make it ECE, and we wanted to go to the first event, which back then was LA.
Okay.
And which was, you know, we were all young kids. So in order to go
14 or whatever.
Yeah, you know, so to get to an event like that, first off, all our parents are coming. You're flying out to California. You don't have sponsors. You don't have a name yet. So you're buying your paint. You're buying everything.
It's a thing. It's a big thing.
It's a big thing. And we ended up going to Nick's house, and everyone brought everything that they had from their house. Snowboards, this, that, and we sold everything to get to the event. And when we got to the event, we took third in our first ever national.
That's
and
awesome.
Johnny from Empire Paintball was like, I really like you guys. You guys have my company name in your name. So he was like, listen,
That's good.
every time you guys make podium, I'll give you paint for the next event. So we were like, all right, sick. So after we took third in LA, we just went to all the locals, and we won every single local event.
Those
and
rolling dudes.
And back then, you got crazy
Good prize.
good
Good
prizes.
yeah.
You know, you would win if you played a 7-man. You won 7 guns, and it was the top, you know, top of the line guns
Right.
back then. So we would sell those guns, get our entry fees paid for, and go to the nationals. And now we would have to place in the nationals to get our paint. If we didn't place, we didn't get paint.
Yeah.
So we were lucky enough to always place to get our paint. And then it got to a point where the GPLs and the Captain Carls and the NEPLs wouldn't let us play anymore. At first they said, listen, we want you guys to sign up last because no teams are signing up.
Right.
So we were like, okay. So that worked for like 2.
Two
And then
events,
after that, they were like, hey, listen, we're sorry. You guys can't play any more locals. So we were like, all right. Now at that point, EC had like we made a name for ourselves.
Right.
So Johnny stuck with us, and we always, 90% of the time, we made podium in D3. You know what I mean? And even D2. So then after the locals, we started getting a lot better, started practicing a lot, and Cousins, after the Hyperball was kind of like in extinction, you know,
Yeah, dead at that point.
You know, they made an airball field. And when the airball field got put up, we would practice at Cousins religiously.
Right.
And then Rob from High Velocity Paintball, because I worked there, was like, I'll make a field for you guys. So he made a legit airball field. And, you know, High Vi and Cousins have real bad blood.
Yeah.
Always, man.
Oh, yeah.
Always been like
And
that.
I've always been in the middle there. Man. I've always been for the game, dude. You know what I
Exactly.
mean?
So,
Yeah.
you know, those guys had real bad blood. And Rob went, cleared out this field, made it beautiful. And we were playing there for a couple weeks. And then Cousins came back to us and was like, listen, we're going to give you a better deal.
There
So
you
they
go.
offered us a really good sponsorship. Now, Rob found out, and he lost his cool. And he ended up tearing down the field. Now, it was tough for me because I worked there.
Right.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, I went from being like you know, like one of his favorite guys and like getting all the groups and the tips from like reffing
I've
to
been
like,
there, bro.
yo, grab the can, kid, and you're picking up garbage all day. You're not even reffing, you know,
Yeah.
like you're going to be picking up garbage. And it was only like that for a little, but I'll never forget when he told me, I'm ripping this field down and I'm making a fucking castle. I'm like, yeah, right, dude. You know, like, I'm like, look at all the people you got coming here. And then before I knew it, man,
That
the
castle
fucking
was
field
there.
got ripped down, man, and he built a castle that
That's how he is, man. He's a. I'll show you.
I'll show you.
Uh-huh.
And he did, yo. And he ripped that shit down and put up the castle field. And, you know, then we stayed at Cousins. And we were playing the Nationals. We were doing well. And we were playing back then against, like, Jay Sattler. You guys
Yeah.
know him?
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, like, he was a baller, man. You know, that kid could ball, you know. And we used to have really good practices with his team. And, like, Paul Sattler invited us to his house. And, like, we had a good rapport with those guys. They're all good guys. All, Rob, everybody, you know,
Right.
all the Cousins guys. And I'll never forget that we were on our way to Chicago. And I think this was 2005. You know, I don't know. But it was 2005. And we were playing Chicago. And right before the day before we were going on the plane, Cousins called and was like, somebody on your team was stealing paint from, you know, whatever. And the shitty thing is it wasn't even one of our guys, you know, but there was so many people involved that they were like, all right, listen, this kid, Jared Sesta, he's like a brother of mine, you know, played on the Bears. He's won everything with us. He took the heat, and he didn't, you know, he wasn't the guy, you know what I mean? Like, it was a guy from, you know, it was a guy within Cousins working, but because he was like there, and they said, listen, if Jared steps on that field, you were dropping your sponsorship. And this was the day before we were going to Chicago. So Jared had to sit that whole event, and we ended up winning that event. And that was the best event ever. You could still YouTube this thing. It was against Voltage.
I've heard, I've seen this, and I've heard this. There was more people in that crowd for a divisional match than was like in the
pro stands. It was incredible. There was people standing on top, and back in the day, you had the huge 18-wheeler trucks that weren't just for paint. You would go into those. Remember, there would be like Quake. You would play Quake inside. You would play like video games. Like, the venues were a lot better.
Right.
So, like, I'll never forget when we were playing them. It was Midwest, you know. So, like, their their hometown is there, you know. Voltage is from the Midwest, and you would just hear hundreds of people just screaming like, Midwest what? And they're like, holy shit, like, this is, you know, this is crazy. Is legit, you know. And when we won that game, it was like, it was for first and second, and it was one of the most epic feelings I've ever had in my life. And the saddest part about it was Jared sat that whole entire event, and he coached me on the snake side. So, like, it was bittersweet for him because, you know, you see your brothers win, and you know there's nothing better than that.
Right.
But, like, deep down in your soul,
you want to be on.
You want to be out there, especially at his caliber. You know, he was one of the best players on the team. So, like, we went into this like, we're losing one of our best players, but we didn't look at it as like losing a best player. Looked at it like losing a brother. You know, this guy literally took the heat when he didn't have to.
Right.
You know, he saved our sponsorship from Cousins. Well, at least for that event. And you know, I'll just never forget the feeling of winning, but I'll never forget the feeling of just looking in his eyes and being like, you know, we couldn't have done it without you, bro.
Right.
You know, so like that event I think for like me, my brother, and like Jared and Nick, that was like probably the most epic event we probably ever had, because of like the odds were so stacked against us, and we were down in that match, and people counted us out, and it was how we came back, and like the way it happened was just it was an iconic match, and you know, I'll never forget it till this day.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was epic.
Dude, I mean, I'm almost tearing up just listening. And I've heard about it, and I feel like even to this day, like some of the pros, like I feel like a lot of the like Nick Sloviak and those dudes are playing on that team, right? Voltage back in the day.
Voltage back in the day was stacked, man, and that team was great. You know, like we just happened to get lucky that day. You know, because paintball, as much as it's skill, it's also luck.
Yeah.
You know, the paintball gods, as everyone says, has to be on your side. You know, you got to get the balls that don't break when you get shot, or sometimes a ref does blow a call, you know, and you got to be on the receiving end, the better end of that, you know, where like if you get shot and it's like, oh, that's rough, thanks ref. Yeah. You know what I mean? Or like, oh, it bounced me in my lens, you know, and you're like, oh yeah, things are happening now, you know. So like that team was stacked. You know, and hats off to those guys, because those guys, you know, now they're, you know, majority of those guys are all pros, and you know, they're still doing great things. You know, like, so like hats off to them, and they're great.
No, yeah. So I know like you earned a pro spot right before the NPPL folded. So tell us a little bit about that, because that had to be like pretty devastating, man. So
the story with this is kind of cool. So when we went from X-Ball to NPPL, when we were playing X-Ball and we were coming through the ranks, that's actually when we met Mike Hinman. And Mike Hinman taught us the most about paintball. And, you know, when we were playing D3, and this was when we were, like, back to that, when we started, when we were playing D3, I'll never forget, Aftermath came up the same year that we came up. So it was like us, Aftermath, and Tipman Effect. And back in the day, man, I'll never forget, like, Tipman Effect had, those Tipman shot, like, forget it, you know what I mean? They were, like, the best guns out, and you were like, what are these guys are shooting, like, rentals, you know what I mean? But, like, those things ripped through anything. And if you guys remember that LA event, it was pouring.
Oh, right,
and, like, those guys' guns never took a shit, you know what I mean? Like they were, like, built for war. And we were playing Aftermath. We never beat Aftermath. Never.
Mm-hmm.
When those guys, we never took a first place in D3 because when Aftermath was there,
Their team was stacked,
their
man.
we play. I met Mouse when the reason why he's Mouse. He was skinny, you know what I mean, and like, but he was cool then, just like he's cool now, you know, like.
Yeah,
And
Marcelo played on that team.
and like, you know, I'm horrible with names, but like, there's another kid that played for Dynasty. He doesn't play anymore.
Tyler Shelton, maybe. I don't know. Dalton.
Dalton.
Oh, Vandy, yeah.
You know, and that kid was great too, you know, and they had a guy named like Mini Mike, and you know, Hinman had so much respect for us, but we also respected those guys because, you know, you respect talent.
Right.
You know what I mean? You don't shit on talent. You know what I mean? Like, you're either you respect the game and you respect talent, or you're a hater.
Right.
You know what I mean? And if you love paintball and you love the game, you respect talent and you go and become better to try to beat
100%.
those guys.
Yeah.
And we were playing World Cup, and we were walking the field right before we were going to play Aftermath to move on the first and second,
Mhm.
right? And who walks on the field? Ali fucking Lang. And, you know, come on, Ali Lang's the GOAT.
Yeah,
right?
still is.
He's still the GOAT. He'll always be the GOAT. There's no one that's ever going to be better than Ali Lang. And, you know, like, Ali Lang's the pioneer of paintball, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And he walks on the field, and he's walking the field with these cats. And my brother's like, now, mind you, like, I don't know, I'm not really good with names, and I'm never a guy to look at somebody like, oh, yo, that's
so and so.
so, you know, everyone wears a mask and a jersey. Like,
Right.
if you're not on my jersey, I'm going to try and shoot you. You know? So,
Exactly.
like, I never had that, like, oh, he's on that side.
Uh-huh.
You know, thank God, because, like, you know, paintball's all mental.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like, a lot of kids go out there, and it's like, oh, you know, Ali's out there, or whoever, you know, and you're like, oh, you know, your game changes because you're not in your zone anymore. You're more about thinking about what they're doing.
Right.
Who's out there.
Mhm.
And Ali Lang's walking the field, and I didn't even realize that my brother's Joey's a diehard Ali Lang fan. We all were.
Yeah.
How could not be?
Yeah, how could you not be? And Ali Lang's walking the field, and he comes up to me, and he's like, yo. I'm like, what's up? He's like, dude, that's a fucking Ali Lang right now. He's walking the field with them. I'm like, no. So we went back in the pit, and we're like, we got Nick's father coaching us, you know, like, and he was a good coach, you know what I mean? But it's a father, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, he learned just like we learned, you know what I
Right.
mean?
Uh-huh.
They got Mike Hinman, they got Greenspan, they got Fraze, they got Ali Lang walking the field, and the sideline was pumped with all these pros, and it's like, all right, you know, and like the way that those guys played the game, it made us transform our game.
Right.
And from that point, Hinman took a liking to us, and he reached out, and he was like, listen, he called us meatballs because majority is Italian.
You're
You know? So he's like, listen, meatballs, you know, if you guys want to come down by me for a week or however long, you guys could stay with me and grind out with Aftermath and grind out with Dynasty and whoever, you know, we play with. So we ended up, it was me, my brother, my friend Jimmy Garrett, who was with us all the way up until we broke up after our pro spot.
Right.
Okay.
And so Jimmy came with us. It was me, Jimmy, my brother, and my buddy Ivan Orama. And we went out to Cali. Now, mind you, we didn't know Mike Hinman from a hole in the wall. We just knew him from going to the events, you know what I mean? So he's like, all right, so we bought, you know, we get our flights. I think he bought our flights, you know? And he was like, listen, I'm going to take care of you guys. So we get, you know, we land. Car comes, picks us up. You know, we get to this house. It's just like gated, you know, this big gate. The house is up in the hills. We don't know nobody, you know? So, like, and we're super young, you know? So, like, holy shit, here we go, you know? So we go, we meet Mike, and the house is literally, so there was this kid, Mini Mike, his name was, and he was great, man. It was Mini Mike, another Mike, and then Mike Hinman. And we get there. The only thing in the house when we got there, it was a vacant house, huge house. It was a big screen TV and a ping pong table. That was it. So we're like, you know, we're putting our shit down, and like, you know, we're like, all right, you know, he's like, all right, guys, so, you know, what do you want to eat? What do you want? What do you want? And Hinman treated us as if, like, not only if we were part of his team, but as if, like, we were his own, you know, like if, like, he was my father almost, you know, and he took care of us. And we stayed out there for a week before the tournament, and all we did was grind. And it was the hardest grind that I was probably ever a part of, because if you know Mike Hinman,
He's nuts.
if you're puss, you know, he's gonna let you know. You know what I mean? Like, he's got no shame in that, and that's what makes him great, because he pushes you to be better. You know, and that's what he did. And when we were grinding with those guys, that's when we really, like, turned, like, the corner of, like, how you should be playing paintball. You know,
Right.
it wasn't like an individual skill game. It was more, it's a game plan. You got to work together and
To execute the plan.
to execute the plan, and you have to work as a team. And like, he changed the way we thought about paintball. Until this day, he's like a great friend of ours and also just like a mentor,
Yeah.
you know. So from that point, after this, Aftermath obviously moved up,
Right.
Mhm.
and we stayed in D2, and we did great in D2. You know, we didn't win any events in D2. We had a couple seconds and thirds, and we always made podium. It was, you know, we always made podium, but we never took like a first place.
Right.
And then, you know, we we had ECE, and then my brother got axed from Matt and Bart Blonsky. Now those
Yeah.
guys are, you know, legends.
East Coast
Yeah.
legends
You know
for
what I'm
sure,
saying?
yeah.
Like, now those guys really, I love those guys. And, you know, Bart and Matt, you know, they taught us a lot. And Bart, till this day, is one of my favorite Snake players ever, you
Yeah.
know. And same thing with Alex Lundqvist. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Alex Lundqvist was great back then. You know, we always used to watch him play. Like, how didn't this fucking guy get shot? You know what I'm saying? Like, he's running and gunning to the corner. And back then, the guns were shooting in the pros. What was it, like 25 a second, right?
Yeah,
Something
yeah,
retarded.
nuts.
Yeah.
You know, and those guys, back when Cousins had the indoor, did you guys ever play there?
Yeah. My
Couple
my
times.
brother played there a couple times.
All right, so we got fortunate enough to have like the people who don't get spoke about anymore, like Nikki Vegas,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like, you know, Nikki Cuba. I'll never forget. Nikki Cuba called me Midgetron. That was like my nickname, and he signed a poster for me. And we would go down once a week, and they would train us. And for months, it would be like Nikki Cuba, Nikki Vegas, Matt and Bart Blonsky, Alex, and they would destroy us,
Yeah.
you know, maliciously, because that's just how it was, you know.
That's how you
it was in New
learn.
York.
That's how it was in New York. You know, there was no, you know, oh, he's the last guy alive, call it.
Yeah.
Those
yeah,
days, you know what I'm saying? Like, those days was like, yo, he's the last one, and you're salvating.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, I'm going to murder this fool. You know what I mean? Like, so we used to grind out at the indoor with these guys, and those guys are the reason that I probably stuck with paintball,
Mhm.
but also wanted to be like them. Because, like, back then, like, Nicky Cuba was, you know, whether he was on excessive or what, he was grinding. You know, I was a New York
Right.
boy right there. Or what about, like, Mr. U?
Yeah.
You know,
U.
Mr. U was another savage.
That's
you
who
know?
taught him,
That's who
dude.
taught me how to play.
That's what I'm saying. Like, Mr. U was a gentleman, you know what I mean, but a problem on the field. And
Yeah, he
like,
is.
those guys, you know, those guys are lost, you know, like, as far as like people forget.
Yeah.
But those guys are like the originators, you know. And the same thing with like Matt and Bart Blonsky. Like, people forget those guys played on Russian Legion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Those guys were like, those guys were in it, and that's when Russian Legion was the
Unbeatable.
Dynasty killer, right?
Yeah.
Like, they came out and they were built to beat Dynasty,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they did.
Yeah.
You know, so like those guys taught us the ropes. Those guys like made us into war machines, and you know, they never ever. We never had bad blood with them.
Yeah.
You know, even if like we scratched a few wins, it was never like, yo, you cheated, and we never fought with those guys because
No.
those guys were already up here as far as like, we know where we are.
Right.
You
Right.
know, we know what we need to do. We, our team, us, we had to figure out how to get there.
Right.
And that's what they did for us. You know, those guys took us to another level that, like, unless you have a mentor like that, you're not going to know.
No.
Because you can't just go out to a paintball field on a weekend and play and think that you got better because you practiced. Because that's, you know, just because you go out there and you practice, it's like playing street ball, right? Like, if you have a horrible free throw, but you don't practice your free throw and you're playing pickup games and you're always hitting your fadeaway, are you getting better?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Your free throw is still trash.
Exactly.
So, like, those guys, like I said, were here, and they got us to there. You know, so, like, I got nothing but love for those guys, and, like, I couldn't thank those guys enough for, like, breeding us
yeah.
and making us, like, better players. So, you know, when going back to MOD, my brother gets a phone call from Matt Blonsky, and he says, hey, listen, now at this point, they're playing on Paintball Authority.
Okay.
So that's the pro team that Ron Butler, you know, had bought, and they were a really good, you know, pro team. And he always wanted to earn a pro spot. That was like his thing. So that's why he always had like Paintball Authority and then MOD.
Right.
MOD was always the semi-pro team. All he ever wanted to do was earn his spot.
Right.
And so Matt calls my brother and says, hey, listen, you know, they're looking to pick up 2 players for MOD. And, you know, you can bring anyone else you want, you know. And my brother, to me, was the best player on our team. You know, if he, you know, even now we play at High-Vi, like, and he still comes, you know, and he picks up a gun and he'll blow your noodle right off. Like, that's just how it is, you know. And my brother's like, yo, Robby, I want you to come. I'm like, all right, dude, sick. So me and my brother ride out to Jersey, and we practice. It's just us and Paintball Authority. It's a tryout.
Yeah.
So we started with one-on-ones, and the coach for Paintball Authority was Paul Atlas, which is the coach of Strange.
Right.
So we started off with one-on-ones, and I didn't lose one-on-one. And the best one I had was against Matt, you know, and I got a lucky ball on him, and he comes up to me and he's checking me, you know, because now it's different, because now he's playing a lower level kid, you know, and he's out there against, you know, he's out there with his boys.
Right.
Yeah.
So, like, you lose. No one likes to lose.
Yeah.
No,
You know what I
definitely
mean?
not,
Like,
man.
no one likes
Shot
to
to
lose.
his pride.
A shot to his pride, you know, but he didn't treat me differently, anything like that. You know, he made me a better player, but we went to the tryout. We did great at the tryout. We had a lucky weekend, and me and my brother got asked to play. So we go and we play. There was 2 more events left in the season. So we played the 2 events. We get close to Ron, and we're like, listen, Ron, we got 3 other killers that if you let us take on for the next season, we'll win the pro spot. You know, like, they're like our brothers. We've been playing with them since we started. And that's what paintball, that's how you become a great team. Like, we learned that from Dynasty, because back then, Dynasty was all best friends. They lived together.
Right.
Like, that's what makes a
They
good
still
team.
are.
They
Most of them
still
still
are.
do.
They still, you know what I mean? So, like, those guys, that was like the mantra we wanted. We
Yeah.
were like, yo, we all came from, you know, we all came from nothing. And we all stayed together, you know, like, so we tell Ron, and Ron's like, all right, bring them down. So we bring Nick, we bring Jimmy, we bring Jared. So it's us 5, and we kept 2 of the MOD guys and one sub. It was Jordan from MOD, this kid Jay, and I forget the other kid.
Didn't his son play on the team?
His son, it's funny because when we got there, his son was like just removing himself from paintball. You know what I
okay.
mean? He was like doing his own thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, and Richie Butler was a baller. Like, even till this day, he put a gun in his hand, he can ball. And the pros always used to say it too, like, Richie can come play with us. But Richie didn't want to back then, you know? It wasn't, just wasn't his thing. So we bring those guys, and we have a scrimmage against Paintball Authority. And we beat them. You know, we had a really lucky weekend against those guys. And the next thing you know, Ron's like, all right, you guys are on the team. You know, like, this is how it is. And rest his soul, like, that was one of the best owners I've ever had. Because his whole thing was, he always said, I want to win. But I don't care if we lose. I want to win, but I want you to have fun doing this. And Ron used to pay his pro players. Right? They used to get paid. So Ron used to say, if you want to be a pro player, you got to earn it. If you earn it, you'll get paid, you know?
Right.
So we're like, all right, cool. So it's us 5 and the 2 other players, and now we got a thing going, and we're doing well. And we start practicing. We start going down. Now, back then, the original Hurricanes.
Yeah.
You know, that was with Blonsky, Son, and, you know, I wish I knew all those guys' names, but those guys were lethal. You know, those guys were nasty. And our practices used to be with the original Arsenal, you know, the original Hurricanes, and Paintball Authority, and us. So every weekend we would do doubles. Ron would have a skid. And it got to the point where, like, people were just shooting loaders in the chrono because Ron was like, yo, no one's leaving until the skid's done. So, like, people were like, oh, my God, like, dude, we've been playing for, like, 10 hours, you know? And Ron's like, Ron would come back, check the paint, and be like, you know, you guys still got some, you know, daylight.
Yeah.
And we would grind, and we would grind, and we would grind. And then because you're playing these guys at such a high level, you know, you have no choice but to get better.
Right.
You know, and then Paul Atlas, I'll never forget it. And I tell NYX this, you know, the Bears, like, this is something that we kind of, like, carried through on what he said. And it was, especially in 7-man, because you didn't have a field that you can practice for 2 weeks before an event.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that was like a big benefit for us where there wasn't a layout release, because you guys know, living on the East Coast, we don't have year-round paintball.
Right.
The
No.
weather, especially on layout weekends, if you get a layout weekend and, you know, you get screwed and it rains both those weekends, you
Yeah,
didn't
you're-
get a practice.
you're fucked.
Right? You're fucked. So he said it, and I live by it. He always told us, listen, don't worry about what the other team is doing. You guys are going to do your plan, and you guys just execute what you're doing.
Right.
And he taught us that you have your breakout. Then from your breakout, you have not your prime, not like your secondary move. It was like, if this guy gets shot, whose guns turn immediately? You know,
Yeah.
if this guy back here gets shot, it was like in sync, you know? So he like opened our eyes into a more job orientated game. And in 7-man, that's how it had to be, because there was no coaching. You only had 7 minutes to win, and it was
Yeah.
points, you know? So like, you shoot a guy, you get X amount of points, you know what I mean? Like, so
Right.
he taught us that it was more about following your own game plan and not worrying about who was down there, what they were doing,
Right.
what their threat was. It was, let's focus on what we're going to do. And that's how he started like coaching us. He wasn't like our coach, because he was Paintball Authority's coach,
Right.
but every time we were at practice, he would always, you know, come critique and teach. You know, that's what he did. And he was great. You know, that guy's been in the game.
He's a legend, dude.
He's a legend, man.
yeah.
Like, talk about Strange, talk about the Strange bus, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure those guys can have stories that'll blow people's minds, you know what I
Minds,
mean?
yeah.
Like, the stories that guy was telling me, and I was just like, damn, like, this is crazy, you know what I mean? You're like, oh my God. And, you know, so practicing against those guys and doing that transformed our team. And then we went to a practice against, we went to Jeff Stein's, where Jeff Stein used to host, like where the Hurricanes used to be. And there was like X amount of fields, and this is when 7-man was, you know, popping, and all the pro players played 7-man. Like,
Right.
you know, the NPPL was just as big
Right.
as
Right.
X-Ball, right? So we went down to this practice. We were the only semi-pro team there. I was playing against like Josh Davey, you know what I mean? Like, we were playing against legends.
Right.
And Jeff Stein calls up Ron after our practice, and he was like, I just want you to know that, you know, MOD, you know, your boys were the best team out here. So Ron was like ecstatic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Sure, dude.
you know,
Yeah,
he was
right?
like
He's, like,
ecstatic.
sick.
You know what I mean? So like, we end up, you know, we do good that year. Then as the year started getting closer to the end, he was like, I want to get this pro spot. So he brings Max Lundquist on.
Mhm.
He brings Greg Hastings on. And he brings Timmy Probes on, which like Timmy, if you ever see this, man, like, I appreciate everything you did for me as a Snake player, because you taught me a lot about the game. So he brought these guys on to try to, like, you know, stack it and try to really like win this pro spot. And, you know, it ended up being that, you know, we go to Huntington Beach. My brother can't play. He was at work and he was using a drill and he tore his fucking thumb. You know,
Ooh.
done. And we took second place, you know, at Huntington Beach. It came into an overtime, or not an overtime. Yeah, it was 1-1 because it's best of 3.
Yeah.
Right.
And they beat us on the third one, you know, by
Oh.
like, it was a tight one, you know. And we lost. We took second. And, you know, we kept progressing. And then toward the end of the year, it was our last match. And you know how it is at paintball. Everyone's looking at the numbers, right? You're
Right.
like, yo, if we do this,
If we
this'll
shoot two
work.
bodies,
Yeah,
we win the series.
We win
or
the
something.
series, exactly. So we ended up losing to whoever. We didn't make it as far as we want. So now we're all in the hotel room and we're like, fuck, like, we didn't
Yeah.
win the pro spot. Next thing you know, like, Timmy runs in. He's like, you motherfuckers did it. You know what I'm saying? He's like, we did it. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, no fucking way. You know what I mean? And like, you remember we were playing like the Naughty Dog. Like, there was like, the teams like were epic
Yeah.
back then,
Yeah.
you know? And like, he runs in, he tells us we won the pro spot. Ron Butler's like through the fucking roof. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
dude.
Because like, that was the only thing Ron ever wanted. He wanted to earn his pro spot. And we got it. We got the pro spot. They come and tell us. And then, you know, he calls us up not too much longer after that, and he's like, so, you know, the NPPL is going bankrupt. He was like, do you guys want to play X-Ball, you know, pro? He was like, the only thing is I can't guarantee that the league is going to stay afloat either. Now, Ron didn't tell us he was sick. So he was like, I'm gonna hold off. Let's see how the cards play out.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next thing we find out, this guy had cancer.
Wow.
And this guy was like the mayor of Jersey. If you haven't met Ron Butler, he was the nicest man you could ever met.
I still hear about him to this day, man.
He is like the best thing that could have happened to paintball, And we win the pro spot. We listen to him. We don't play X-Ball. We figured we wait. But I think he said that because he was sick. He didn't tell us,
Right.
And he ultimately passes. And once he passed, it was like, all right, so there's we don't have a pro spot anymore. We lost our sponsor.
Yeah. What do we do?
What do we do? Now what? So the team took like a little hiatus, not too much, but I didn't stop. That's when I played with Orion.
Okay.
So I was working at High-Vi. I met Tom O'Rourke, and he was like, yo, I want you to play. And I was going to college, And I'm like, dude, I can't, I have to swing like enough money to get like a laptop for school. And he's like, listen, I'll buy you your fucking laptop. I'll do this. I'll pay for everything. I'll buy you your gun. I'll do this. I'm like, all right, man. Like, I don't want to not play paintball. You know what I mean? Like, and like, I didn't ever take anything from him that, like, I never asked for money.
Right.
You know what I mean? I never did anything like that. And, he became like a lifelong friend of mine. And I played one like season locally because that's all they did. They played locals. And then after that is when we were like, all right, what's next? Right? So what was next for us was, which is kind of cool, is we went from like sitting out a little while to then getting right back into the swing of things, and we started playing for this team called Riptide. I don't know if you guys ever heard of them. They're out.
New England, right?
Yeah. And that's when we were playing like again now the Hurricanes, but we were playing against Banakia and all them because now these guys are playing X-Ball.
Right.
You know what I mean? Now these guys were even nastier. You know what I
Right.
mean? So now we were playing as Riptide, and back then when we were playing, we were in an open class. Remember when X-Ball had the open class?
Yeah.
You were allowed whatever pros you wanted. So open was just like playing pro.
Right.
So we played as Riptide for 2 seasons. We did well, but we didn't have the caliber
Of players.
of players to like compete. We always took like a top 4, or
Right.
we would like make Sunday and lose right before top 4. We
Okay.
always made Sunday, and then he ends up pulling out. He's like, I can't do this anymore, because
The guy
paintball is
that owned
expensive.
Riptide.
The guy who owned Riptide, he's like,
Okay.
no, I can't do this anymore. I got to pull out. So we're like, all right, and then we had another hiatus. We took 4 years off from
Oh, wow.
paintball. So
Damn.
yeah,
dude.
like,
I didn't think
so-
it was that long. I got you though.
we took 4 years off, and then you guys know how it is. You got the itch, right? So now like we're all like, all right, let's get back into this. So
Right.
that's when we met Jim Kim from Long Live,
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
and we're like, let's just go play. So we go down to Long Live with the boys, and it just so happened to be that day Jim Kim was looking to sponsor a team that was down there. He thought was good. We didn't know this, we were just
Alright.
going to the local field.
You were just looking to play.
We were looking to play. We heard that Long Live was a good place to
Was
play,
a
so we go
spot.
down there, and we blew some fucking noodles off. You know what I mean? So we're leaving, and Jim comes up to us and he starts talking to us, and he's like, "How would you guys like to play a tournament? I'll pay for it." Now we just got back.
Yeah.
He's like, "It's next weekend. It's in wherever it was," and we're like, "All right, sure."
Yeah.
So we go to this fucking tournament. We're off for 4 years. We have 1 practice under our belt, and we end up fucking playing first and second against Arsenal. And
It's like you
those
never
guys
left.
don't know who the fuck you know what I mean? Like it's funny because in the beginning of the tournament, those guys were like kind of like how we were as EC. Those guys were taking those prizes
Mhm.
to get them to fund for, you know what I'm saying,
Right.
their
National events.
nationals. So throughout the event, it was like midday, and all of a sudden you start seeing like, who the fuck is Leverage? You start
Yeah.
looking at the board, and you're like, these fucking kids, Max. It's like, who the fuck? So we end up playing, Arsenal. Or Avalanche, and we beat these guys, and they fucking lost it, yo. They lost their shit, you know what I mean, after we beat these guys, and then it was like a big buzz, like, ECE comes back after 4 years and fucking wins a tournament, you know what I mean? So we win this event for Jim. Jim's ecstatic. He's like, all right, I'm going to put you guys in some nationals. So we play some nationals with Jim Kim, made some nice podiums, couple second places, and we're doing good.
So you guys were the original Leverage?
No.
No.
I don't think so.
Okay.
But I could be wrong.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
I'm not too sure either. Because I'm saying there's leverage now, so I think that's just Jim's brand.
I think
let's
that's
say.
like Jim's, thing. And Jim Kim was another great owner. You know what I mean? He did the right thing by us always, and like his field's beautiful. So like it was a nice field to practice at and to do things. So we played 2 seasons with leverage, and then Cousins opened up in Cavalton. So we were like, all right, this is sweet. So I'm in college, and I get approached by this kid named Kevin Conklin, and he's like, listen, they were the Stackmont Oakland.
Stratton Oakmont Bears.
Right.
Yeah.
So he was like, we got this guy named Magic Mike, and we got some good plays now that you guys are kind of like, why don't we merge? So we're like, all right, we could play locally. So we merge, and then Magic Mike kind of like switched up the roster a little bit, did his thing, and then we played not too long with like all those guys, and then Magic kind of took over the Bears name, made it the Bears, and then we went from we went right into D2, and we won a series title.
Yeah.
And then went right from D2, went in the semi-pro in our first event in Vegas, went undefeated, and won fucking first place in Vegas in semi-pro.
That was dope.
And like I'll never forget, we were playing who's the team that really won the pro spot before they made like the 4 teams go in? It is DMG. DMG was the real team that year who was like the truth, right? Those guys earned their pro spot. Those were that was the number 1 seed. So I'll never forget MYX after we tied DMG. Now those guys, we were up like 5-0 on them, and they fucking come back and they tie us, and MYX comes up to us and they're like, yo, welcome to the fucking semi-pro league. You know what I mean? They're talking shit. And we didn't know, we didn't know nothing about DMG and whoever the fuck, you know what I mean? Like,
Cali kids,
like
whatever.
we don't know. Like the one thing about our guys, and like me, my brother, Jim, Joey, Jared, Nick, all of us, we stayed together as like, we were friends. We all live around the block. Jimmy lived in my basement. Jared lived right around the block. Like we hung out every single day my whole life. So like when we were at paintball, it was 5 of us at paintball, stayed at the field all day, watched games. Like we love watching paintball in the grandstands all day. Go back to the hotel room. We didn't talk to nobody. We weren't into like, not like we're not social people, but like, there was just like, we want to win. We like playing paintball, but like, this is what we like to do. So we, MYX is telling us this shit, and we end up, we win Vegas, and then we go the following year. And in the following year, we're praying we win the pro spot. And the year that we won Vegas, that we thought we had a shot at winning the pro spot, Magic thought it was a good idea to bring LJ and Zach, I don't know.
Zach Patient, yeah.
Both.
For World Cup, right?
Yeah, so those guys are sick ballers. You know what I'm saying? Now, LJ will tell you, LJ was a young kid, and he came down to Cousins Paintball. He was super young. I got videos of him. Like, you wouldn't even believe how young this kid is. I don't want to say we taught him everything he knows, because he's an amazing player. Like he does.
Up until a point.
Yeah, like that kid. He's great. He's arguably the best center player in the game. You know what I mean? So, but LJ was with us as a young kid, and we end up. Magic takes LJ. We're like, yo, this is sick. LJ was like so happy to be back with us, and we were just as happy. He's like a little brother to us, and he tells us about Zach, and we're like, well, this is sick. We have a sick Dorito player, sick center player.
All right.
So we think we're doing something smart, juicing up the roster. But like I said earlier, if you don't have like chemistry, and you're not like working together, and just because you have like great individual talent, you can't win. So like that World Cup was our worst showing probably of my career. You know what I mean? Like that was the worst showing we've ever had. And it wasn't because like we didn't know the field. It wasn't because like, you got bad calls from the ref. It was because we weren't like in sync.
You weren't
know
a
what
team.
I mean? It was like those guys came just for layouts, and you got to be more.
Yeah, I like to word it as players win you points, a team wins the tournament.
That you're 100% correct. So like we lose that, and I think Magic, filled with emotions, was that he pulled the plug, and that's when the Bears, Magic was more like, I got my kid, and I want to start like. Transforming my kid into paintball and like taking some time for myself.
Right.
So completely understandable. Everyone knows how expensive paintball is, and Magic Mike is another one, arguably maybe the second best one I've ever had compared to Ron Butler. Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? And like he's like a father to us. You know what I mean? Like I can't say anything bad about that man. He's done everything and more for us. So he pulls out at Cup. He doesn't wait.
Right.
You know, like he was so upset when we lost our second World Cup. This is without LJ. We lost to Elevation. I got us a penalty on a pack hit in overtime. And even if we would have won that, if we would have won that, because they took 4 teams that year, like NYX and whatever, if we would have won that, we would have been that team to be taken.
Right.
But we didn't win that, you know? So Magic was so upset that, like, at Cup, he was, like, thanking all of our sponsors and just letting them know, like, if any of my guys ever need anything, please look out for them. I'm not going to be around for a little while. I'm going to, you know, take a little hiatus of paintball. That's when Frank left. You know, Frank was like, all right. So Frank goes to Aftermath, you know, because now at this point, Frank has a great relationship with Mike Hinman because now, like, we introduce him to Mike.
Right.
We start practicing Aftermath because now Aftermath's back in the league. They came back as D2, and then, like, in World Cup, they played, like, semi-pro, I believe.
Right.
So Frank goes up to him, and they start talking. Frank earns his spot on Aftermath, you know. So, like, we already lose, like, one of our better players. So now we're thinking, you know, we're done.
Yeah, team's gonna fold.
So team's gonna fold. You know, guys are getting older. Like my brother, you know, like he's got 2 kids. You know what I mean? Like, and he went to World Cup when his kid was born and was only a week old, and bang, went to Cup. You know what I mean? So like, we were like, all right, we're done. And then I love paintball.
Yeah,
you know what
man,
I mean?
can tell
Like
it's speaking in, man.
I love paintball more than like almost anything in the world. You know what I mean? So my wife's like, what are you going to do? You know, my wife knows how much I love paintball. And I'm like, I don't know. You know what I mean? So she was like, well, why don't you like X to like, you know, try out or do something? So I go up to MYX. They're playing a 10-man. And I go up to Arslan. I'm like, yo, man, you know, I don't know if you guys are doing tryouts or whatever. I'm like, but just keep me in mind, you know? So mad time goes by, and it's like December. Now, this whole time I was going to High Velocity Indoor. Watch James Penn, Andrew Smith, like those guys, same thing. Those guys, they knew me since I'm 10 years old. You know what I mean? Like I went there, I'm playing Ground Zero. I'm playing these guys like getting destroyed as a kid. And, you know, there's 10 guys in behind a can that's upside, like on sideways. Remember how I used to put the can sideways? Like, so like I grew up playing there. So I never knew if I was going to get a call from MYX, but I also didn't want to lose my sharpness.
Right.
So I was grinding regardless. I was going down by myself every Wednesday after work for months, drilling by myself for months.
You have to get ready when you stay ready.
Yeah, you know, plus like I just can't put the gun down, you know what I'm saying? It's in my veins, you know, like I love this shit. So I get a call from Arslan, and he's like, yo, man, get a flight to Florida and come for a tryout. I'm like, all right, man, I'll let you know. Now, like, I'm petrified of flying. I've been flying my whole life, and I hate it. So I go back home like, yo, Denise, you know, Arslan from MYX called me, and he asked me, you know, go for a tryout. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to do it, you know. Like, I don't know how I feel about playing without, like, my brother, you know what I mean? Like, these guys have been playing with my whole life. I've never not played with them, you know what I mean? Like, ever. Yeah. You know, so she's like, Robby, I think you'll regret it. You know, like, next thing you know, like, I'm at work. I get a confirmation email that my flight's booked. So I call her. I'm like, yo, did you just book my flight to fucking Florida? She's like, I did. She's like, I want you to do it. I'm like, oh, man. So I call up Arslan and Bo. And I'm like, all right, guys, like, I'm going to come. I'm like, yo, is there going to be, like, someone to pick me up? Like, what's the deal here? You know? They're like, nah, don't worry, Robby. You know, like, whatever. I'm like, all right. So they pick me up from the airport. I'm playing against Damage. It's us and another team. Infamous. I'm the only fucking, at this point, D2 player. D2 because the year that Magic broke up the team, I didn't stop. I played with NWO.
Right.
You know? I didn't want to stop playing, you know? So they asked me to play. I was only going to play Vegas because Nick Crichione was going to actually play with them. Right. So I go to Vegas. I take my wife to Vegas. I'm like, you never been to Vegas. Let's just go, you know? And I wanted to play. So we go, we play. We have a really good event in Vegas. Those guys are, like, all happy with everything. And they're like, Robby, we want you to stay for the rest of the season with us NWO. And I'm like, you know, I can't do that. You know, Nick's gonna do it. You know, like I only did it because Nick couldn't do it. Right. So I end up playing the full season with them, and then that's when I, you know, talk to Arslan. So I go to this tryout. It's all the pro players now. I'm known as a D2 guy, you know, and I'm out here with like I'm obsessed with Spider-Man. You know, so like I'm out here in a Spider-Man jersey, you know what I mean? Like, and then like, yo, what the fuck are you wearing, Robby? And I'm like, yo, what do you mean? You know what I mean? Like, this is my shit. You know? Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, I'm like, this is what I rock. You know, when I practice, I'm always in some type of Spider-Man apparel. Like, so I never was nervous about playing because, like I said, I didn't know anybody.
Right.
You know, so like Keith Brown because it's Keith Brown, right? You know what I mean? Like he's a
He looks
savage
a
and
certain way.
he's a certain. You know what I'm saying? Like you know who Keith Brown is, but like I couldn't look on the opposite end of that field and be like, who's this guy? I didn't know.
Right.
You know what I mean? I was never like.
You never that wasn't your game.
It just wasn't me, you know what I mean? Like, and all those guys are super cool. It's nothing about that. It was just like I just never, I never talked to anybody. You know, I was like to myself.
Right.
So I go to this tryout, and Frank calls me after like the first day. He's like, "Yo, how'd you do?" I'm like, "I don't know, dude. I think I had a lucky weekend." You know what I mean? I'm like, my first game, I put a lucky ball on Keith Brown. I was like, I think I played pretty well, and it started out with one-on-ones. I didn't lose a one-on-one. I had a lucky day with that. And then MYX did a thing where it was like, all right, they had 5 guys come try out or something like that. It was like me, Keith DeVitt, Scott Graham, who made the team, and 2 other kids. One kid plays on Trade My Gun, and the other kid I don't remember his name. So it was us 5, and we were all trying out. So MYX is like, all right, we're going to play the starting 5 of MYX versus the guys that are going to try out. So, Keith, you'll like this, bro, if you watch this. So we end up, playing them. Well, MYX didn't beat us 1 fucking point. You know what I mean? So it got to the point where I go up to Keith. I'm like, dude, should we ask them to switch the teams? You know what I mean? I'm like, So we have a good, good tryout, good week. And I thought everybody played well. I don't even think, I can't sit here and say I played way better than anybody else. I think we all played great. I think they could have picked the names out of a hat and made MYX just as good as they are now. You know what I mean?
Right.
So every one of those guys were sick ballers. So I think I was just fortunate enough to get picked. I think anybody could have got it. So Frank calls me up again Sunday night as I'm leaving. I'm in the airport. He's like, dude, is there a D2 kid there? I'm like, I don't know, dude. I'm like, why? He's like, well, now Frank's on Aftermath.
Right.
Frank's like, well, John is saying that there's some D2 kid that's balling out there. I'm like, well, I think I'm the only cat that's D2, bro.
Yeah.
I'm like, but yo, Frank, I really don't know, bro. You know what I mean? Like, I can't tell you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He's like, well, yo, they're saying that there's some D2 kid out there that's really playing well. He's like, so if you're telling me the only D2 kid, and he was like, but, yeah, he's like, but Robby, you don't fucking know nothing. You know what I mean? He's like, so he was like, but I think, I'm like, well, we'll see. You know what I mean? So now I get back, and now I'm like, am I going to get the call? You know what I mean? Right. So now I'm like waiting, and I'm not going to call Bo or Arslan. You don't do that,
Right.
So you wait. So I'm at work, and I'm like, fuck, man. My boss is like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, yo, dude, it's Wednesday. You know what I'm saying? The tryouts were on Saturday and Sunday. I'm like, I definitely didn't make the team, So I get a phone call from Bo, and I walk out the trailer, and he's like, you got a sec to talk? So he's like, hey, Robby, I just want to thank you for coming down. And, unfortunately, you made the team. Yo, when he told me this, I jumped for joy because I wanted to do this not just for myself, but I really wanted to do this for me, my brother, Nick, Jared, Jimmy, all the legends who taught me how to play paintball, the people that people forget because those guys are the guys who made me who I am today. You know what I mean? All the greats, and even Ali Lang, Ali Lang came down to a clinic at High with Nicky Cuba. And, I was fortunate enough, I was speed training at this point, and they were doing it too. This is when Ali Lang and Nicky Cuba were on Die. And we were speed training with them. We were going out to dinner with them. Then we were practicing with them. So they come down for a clinic. And this Tom O'Rourke's like, Robby, I want you and your brother to come down. And, Ali Lang and Nicky Cuba will contest it. They will tell you this is true. It was a clinic. There was mad people there, and we started off with 2-on-2s. It was Nicky Cuba and Ali Lang versus me and my brother. And we beat them a few times. And we got very lucky. You know what I mean? It was, we were lucky that day. And we got asked to switch up the teams. And now, mind you, Ali Lang's my brother's favorite player. You know what I mean? So now at this point, Ali Lang and us are friends. You know what I mean? And even still, before he retired, we would go to the events and be like, "Hey kid, how's your brother?" You know what I mean? That's the type of guy he was. So it's lunchtime, and Ali Lang's like, after lunch, he's like, "All right, we're gonna start with one-on-ones." So I go up to my brother. I'm like, "All right, Marv." I call my brother Marvin. His name's Joey. I'm like, "Yo, Marv." I'm like, "I'll play against him first." And I was like, "I'm gonna go lefty just to show you I can beat this motherfucker." So he's like, "All right, dude." So we play, and I beat him. I put a lucky ball on him. I beat him. I go give him a pound. You know, and he doesn't give me a pound. You know what I mean? Like, he shrugged me off, you know? You know, he shrugged me off. But which was cool, you know what I mean? Because afterwards we went out to dinner and, like, we all hung out and stuff. And, like, those guys treated us like as we were, like, little brothers, you know what I mean? So, back to NYX, I get the phone call. You know, Bo tells me, you know. So I go home. I tell my wife. I call my brother up. I'm crying, you know what I mean? Because, like, I wanted to do it for those guys, you know? Right. Because, like, those guys are better than me. You know what I mean? Like, my brother's better than me. Jared's better than me. Nick's better than me. Like, these guys are all better than me. You know what I mean? I was just fortunate enough to get the opportunity to go out there and try out.
Right.
And, you know, they just didn't, you know, my brother had other things going on. And, you know, Jared wasn't really into, you know what I mean? He didn't want to do it with everybody, you know? So, like, I got the call. So I had to, like, represent for those guys. It wasn't just for me, but I had this, you know, this is what we are about.
Dude,
you know
represent the whole island, man. Honestly.
Pretty much.
I don't mean to blow your head up, bro.
No,
but I mean,
not
you
at
and
all.
Frank kind of represent Long Island, dude. I mean, and Woodley a little bit too. I mean, he was kind of, I went to school with Woodley, so like that's how I kind of like originally was like. He'd be like, yeah, I'm going to Chicago, play paintball. And I was just playing, like, rental guns. I'm like, what, dude, you're going to Chicago? I'm like, this is sick, bro. What are you, ECE, dude? What are you talking about? So, like, I had no idea, dude. So, like, you just coming back to that, just, I mean, you know, I'm not saying to blow your head up, but, dude, I mean, you represent Long Island, dude.
Thanks,
I mean,
man.
you've taught a lot of the guys here. You know what I mean?
I just feel like if you don't go and try to grow the sport,
Mm-hmm.
right, and the legends that I was telling you guys about, and these greats that, you know, like, will always be greats but aren't in the game anymore, if those guys didn't do it for me, why, you know, like, I would never be where I am. So for me
Mm-hmm.
not to try and grow the sport and be like a gentleman to the kids and like at the guys coming up and teaching, you can't grow the sport.
Right.
You got to grow the sport if you want this, you know, you want this sport to excel.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you want to do that for people, you know what I mean? Like, and when I go down the high-vi, and I never wear any pro apparel, you know what I mean? Because I don't want to be known as like, oh, yo, that's a pro. Like, no, I'm Robby Altamore.
Yeah.
You know what I
Your
mean?
boy,
Like,
Robby,
I'm your boy,
what's
dude. Like, yo, what's going on? Like, yo, you, like, you know, and like, that's how I want paintball to be, you know what I mean? I don't want a mantra. I don't, you know, that's why I like this podcast.
Yeah.
I did this because, like, you know, I respect what you're doing, although, you know, like, I love what you guys are doing. I like how
thanks,
you're growing
man.
the sport, you know, like, the clinic that we're going to do, like, what's better than helping kids, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, so, like, I do this because of that, you know, but, like, social media, things like that, like, that's not me, man. I just want to go play some paintball and, like, have a good time, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, but I want to win.
Exactly.
So, you know, I make the team. You know, I'm going crazy, and now, like, the grind is on for me.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
now, like, all right, cool, you made the team. Are you going to start? Right?
Right.
'Cause nothing's given to you. So now, like, I'm going down the high-vi even more.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm staying late, and they're giving me the field. And, like, Andrew Smith is drilling me, you know what I mean? And James Penn is helping me out with everything I can. And, like, all the guys, Andy Hahn, like, Magic is coming down. Magic's bringing his son so I can, like, mentor his son. And, like, all these guys are just helping me tremendously, giving me every opportunity I can to try and win, you know, or try to earn my spot. And, you know, I did good enough to earn, you know, a starting role on the team. And that's, you know, my first season when NYX was epic. You know, like, Bo Milo is another just one of the best owners you could ask for. And those guys on NYX, like, you know, they have this mantra, like, you know, on how they are. But, like, those guys are really cool guys, man. And they can ball, you know what I mean? But, like, it's not that easy coming from the East Coast to contend with West Coast teams. You know, you got to grind that much harder, and you got to do so much more. So, like, my first season with them was arguably one of my favorite seasons ever because what those guys taught me, how good those guys are, what the owner's done for me. You know what I mean? So, like, my journey through paintball, like, hopefully it's not finished.
No,
but
man. I hope
I hope not either,
you
because I know,
know?
like, I know you're not doing it, but, like, the Long Island, like, I love when I watch the webcast and you're on. I'm like, that's our boy, man. Robby, the Long Island guy is on. You see that?
That's awesome, man. I love that, man. Thanks so much. You know, it's you do it for us, right?
Yeah.
You do it for us. You do it because it's like, yo, who's that kid? Yo, he's from Long Island. He's from New York. Like, you're damn right I'm from New York. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Represent,
hell
like,
yeah.
we grind. You know what I mean? Like, it's harder for us, and we want it that much more. You know what I mean? Like, we don't have the benefit of playing Dynasty every week. You know what I mean? We don't have the benefit of playing Damage every week. You know what I mean? Like, we don't have that. So, like, you got to grind harder. You want it, you got to go get it. You want to go get it, then you better earn it. You know what I mean? And, like, that's what it's about. And there was nothing better than just going to High-Vi and having all the support from the locals and having the support from High-Vi itself. And you're doing it for them. Like,
Right.
you know, that's like the gas in your tank. You know, you're looking at a kid that's looking at you like you're like a star. And you know, you don't, you know, at least myself, I don't look at myself that way. But then I look at that kid like he's a hero, right? Because
Right.
I'm looking at him like, I'm doing it for you, bro. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, and I'm doing it for you. And I'm doing it for Magic Mike's kid because, like, that kid is young and, like, he loves paintball. And I want to do nothing but make him better, or at least try and make him better. You know, like, I'm not, you know, this great paintball player, you know what I mean? Like, I'm good, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? But there's way better players out in the world better than me, you know what I mean? But, like, you do this for these people, and, like, because of all the love and support from everyone on Long Island and High Velocity and Cousins, it's like you're representing, you know, and you're doing it for everybody, and that's what matters, you know. And, like, if you do that, you'll get to where you want to be, you know. And, like,
Right.
I think from playing with MYX and getting the support from everybody locally, not only boosts my confidence in myself, but it also just, it made me realize how special of a sport it is. You know what I mean? And, like, how grateful I am to, I played, you know, I'm 31. I started at 10. I'm 21 years in the game, legit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and it just makes you think, especially with this whole COVID thing, paintball's gone right now. And it makes you realize how important the sport
is to
really
you.
is to you. You know what I mean? And is to the new kids coming up and everybody else coming up. So, like, what's better than that?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like if you're a real pro athlete in any sport you do it for the next generation. You know what I mean? You're doing it for your family. You're doing it for, you know, your brothers. You're doing it, you know, for everybody else. And that's, in my opinion, what makes you a great player. You know what I mean? So, like, I couldn't be any blessed, and I just hope that I could continue to be great. You know, I want to be great.
Yeah,
I
dude, you
wanna
got the
be the
mindset.
best.
It's like, and paintball's so mental. So, like, you're already, like, so close to there, man. Like, I love just hearing you talk and how, like, the way you approach everything. It's fucking awesome, dude.
Thanks, bro. I appreciate it.
Yeah, because, like, so many people, like, or whatever, maybe it's because we're here, but, like, dude, like, I see so much softness nowadays. And, like, I mean, I feel like I'm a broken record. I say this all the time and stuff, but, like, I'm sick and tired of seeing kids get, like, beat, like, 3 times and then, like, they quit paintball. It's like, dude, what are you... Like, dude, take your lumps and keep it going. Don't sit there and be like, oh, well, this team beat me. You'll fuck them. It's like, okay, well, how did they beat me? Like, those are things I should be doing. It's fucking
You gotta
insane.
grind. You gotta grind. You gotta respect the fact that whoever you're playing against is better than you. And if you just say to yourself, like, how many times you hear, well, they should beat us,
Yeah.
right? Because all of a sudden we're getting judged by what division we are.
Right.
Really? Like, you know, you could start a brand new team and you can say, oh, we want to play semi-pro.
Mm-hmm.
Are you supposed to lose to this team because they're semi-pro?
Uh-huh.
Nah.
You know what I mean? Like, does that make any sense? You know what I mean? Like, you can't think like that. And, like, it goes back to, like, knowing, like, the name on the back of somebody's jersey. Oh, I should lose because that's Keith Brown.
Right.
I should lose because that's Tyler Harmon or,
Whatever.
you know what I mean? One of these great, you know, one of the greats. You know what I mean? Like, but it's not like that. You know what I mean? Like, you got to dig deep in your soul. And you
Right.
got to know that you can beat anybody.
Like you
know?
said, it doesn't matter who's on the other side. Your plan is your plan.
Your plan is your plan.
Unless
you know
he's
what I
on your
mean?
start box, they're not stopping you, so execute your plan.
You need to grind harder than the next guy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what paintball comes down to.
Hell
you know,
yeah.
if you're going to put the work in, you're going to see results because your snapshot will get better. Your mental spectrum of the game will get better. Your running and gunning will get better. But you got to be ready for bloody knuckles. You got to be ready for that. We would go to High Vi, and you guys been to High Vi. It's a fucking hallway, right?
Yep.
Me and Nick and the Bears, you know how we used to drill? We used to have all the bunkers down, one guy on one end, one guy on the other, running and gunning back and forth at each other. Dude, we were getting fucking destroyed, bro.
Uh-huh.
And we weren't shooting 260. We're shooting 300.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? And we would do that for hours, bro, just to get your running and gunning. Because you know what that does? If you're not scared to get shot, that means you're looking at the target when you're running.
Right.
How many people go like this?
Yeah.
Right? They don't want to get shot. They're looking at their bunker before they run into it. You're not going to shoot nobody that way.
Right.
You need to be looking at what you're shooting at. And those drills and the bloody knuckle drills that we did, you know, that's what it takes to be at that level.
Mhm.
And if you do that, you will see results. But you got to want it. No
Yeah.
one's going to give this shit to you.
Oh,
You know what
no.
I mean? Like, you got to go grind for this. And there's nothing better than the paintball grind.
Oh, no.
We all know that.
100%, man. So we're coming up to that time where we're gonna wrap things up, dude. We
Yeah.
could definitely have you on again. I appreciate you
cool.
coming again. Anybody, I mean, you want to shout out? I know you've had many paintball mentors, and I don't feel, you know, if you miss a couple, we'll just have to have you on again.
I just want to thank, you know, Magic Mike and the Bears, everyone at High Vi, Andrew Smith, James Penn, you know, all the legends I spoke about earlier, you know, DeMacy, Blonsky's, the Lundquist, you know, Samurai Pat. I can't thank you enough. You've been on this journey with me since I started. You made me a way better player. You know, if you coach me, you know, Scott, if you see this, you too, you came to the indoor with me and you grinded with me, and you know, all the sponsors, MYX, thank you for giving me an opportunity. to become a pro player and obtain my dream. Ron Butler for, you know, everything you did for us. And, you know, and if I'm forgetting anybody, I'm sorry. I just want to thank everybody who got me here, all the greats, all the legends, and I hope I can carry, you know, your legacy and make mine just as good. Thanks, guys.
Couldn't have said it better myself, guys. So again, Robby's going to be doing a clinic at Cousins. The whole camp runs from January 20th to the 24th. But Robby's going to be there on the 24th for the morning session. So if you guys want to get in, either reach out to me or go out to cousinspaintball.com, and you can definitely get involved in the camp. We're happy to have them, and it's going to be great. And just kicking it again back to Dizana Sports for always sponsoring everything we do, from everything I do, from the podcast to the camp. Use our code Overshot, get the new joggers, get the Grind Air gloves, and definitely go out there and play paintball. Whether you live, you know, in the tri-state area, you can go to Cousins Paintball. You can shop Cousins Paintball. Again, the code is always Overshot. But just get out there, play paintball, stay safe, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Take it easy, guys.
Thanks.
I love the rest